Jake Morrison had seen better days. His ship lay in pieces somewhere in deep space, and now he sat in chains on an alien world. The metal felt cold against his wrists. Around him, strange beings with purple skin and glowing eyes watched from every corner of the massive throne room. They were tall, much taller than any human. Their muscles rippled under armor that looked like it was made for war. The Crithians, they called themselves. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. Jake and his crew had stumbled into their territory by accident. One moment they were exploring unknown space. The next their engines were dead and they were surrounded by warships. The battle, if you could call it that, lasted less than 5 minutes. Now Jake stood before their queen. She sat on a throne of black stone that rose like a mountain from the floor. Queen Zarakai was even taller than the other Crithians, at least 7 feet. Her violet skin seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes were amber, bright and sharp like a predator's. She wore armor decorated with symbols Jake didn't understand. A crown of metal thorns rested on her head. Everything about her screamed power and danger. The other members of his crew stood beside him. Amy Brooks, his second-in-command, kept her face blank. Danny Martinez, the ship's engineer, looked at the floor. They all knew they were in trouble. Big trouble. A Crithian warrior stepped forward. He was covered in scars and his armor looked old but well used. He spoke in a language Jake couldn't understand, but the translation device they'd been given made the words clear in his ear. "These are the humans, my queen. The weak ones from the small ship. Their technology is primitive. Their bodies are soft. They have no claws, no natural weapons. I do not understand why we waste time with them." Laughter filled the room. Jake felt his face grow hot with anger, but he kept quiet. Getting angry wouldn't help anyone right now. The queen leaned forward on her throne. Her eyes studied Jake like he was an interesting bug. "Soft, you say? Weak?" Her voice was deep and carried across the room easily. "Then let us test this. Let us see what these humans are made of." She pointed at Jake. You will fight in the arena. If you survive, perhaps you and your crew have some value. If you die, well, at least you will provide entertainment." "Fight what?" Jake asked. His voice came out steadier than he felt. The queen smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Dexthor, one of our finest gladiators. He has killed 53 opponents in the arena. You will be his 54th, more laughter." Amy tried to step forward, but guards pushed her back. "This isn't fair," she shouted. "He's not a warrior. He's a pilot." "Then perhaps you should have stayed in your own small corner of space," the queen replied coldly. "Take him to the arena." Strong hands grabbed Jake. He didn't fight as they dragged him away. What would be the point? He heard Amy calling his name, heard Danny's protests. Then a door slammed shut and the sounds faded. They threw him into a small room with stone walls. Minutes passed like hours. Jake paced back and forth thinking. He'd trained in hand-to-hand combat back on Earth. Military Academy had taught him how to fight. But that was against other humans. Dexthor was an alien warrior who had killed over 50 opponents. This was a death sentence. The door opened. Guards motioned for him to follow. They walked through dark tunnels until suddenly bright light hit Jake's eyes. He stepped out onto sand. The arena was huge, bigger than any stadium on Earth. Thousands of Crithians filled the seats, all shouting and cheering. The noise was deafening. Across the arena, another door opened. Dexthor walked out and the crowd went wild. He was massive, even for a Crithian. His armor was decorated with bones and his weapons gleamed in the sunlight. He carried a blade that glowed with blue energy. The weapon hummed with power. Jake looked down at himself. No armor, no weapons, just his uniform and his bare hands. He looked up at the royal box where Queen Zarakai sat watching. Her face showed no emotion. A horn blew. The fight had begun. Dexthor charged forward with a roar. The sand exploded under his feet. Jake dove to the side, rolling away from the energy blade. The weapon cut through the air where he'd been standing. It would have split him in half. The crowd booed. They wanted blood, wanted to see the human die quickly. Jake scrambled to his feet. His mind raced. He couldn't match Dexthor's strength or reach. The energy blade meant he couldn't even get close without risking death. But humans didn't survive by being the strongest. They survived by being smart. Jake looked around the arena. There were obstacles scattered across the sand. Pillars of stone, broken walls, pieces of old weapons. The arena wasn't empty. Good. He could use that. Dexthor attacked again. This time Jake didn't just dodge. He grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at the warrior's eyes. The Crithian snarled and stepped back, blinking. The crowd gasped. That wasn't honorable. That wasn't how warriors fought. Jake didn't care about honor. He cared about living. While Dexthor cleared his vision, Jake ran toward one of the stone pillars. The warrior chased him, angry now. Jake waited until the last second, then ducked behind the pillar. Dexthor's blade struck stone instead of flesh. Sparks flew. The blade cut deep into the rock. For just a moment, the blade was stuck. Jake moved. He kicked hard at Dexthor's knee from the side. The warrior grunted in pain. The joint bent wrong. Not broken, but hurt. Dexthor pulled his blade free and swung again. Jake was already gone, moving to the next obstacle. The crowd's boos turned to confused murmurs. The human wasn't fighting. He was surviving. And somehow that was working. In the royal box, Queen Zarakai leaned forward. Her amber eyes tracked every movement. She had seen thousands of arena fights. She had fought in hundreds herself. But she had never seen anything like this. The human moved like water, never where you expected. He used everything around him as a weapon. He didn't fight with strength. He fought with his mind. Dexthor was getting tired. The injured knee slowed him down. His swings became wilder, less controlled. Jake noticed. He'd been waiting for this. Tired fighters made mistakes. The warrior charged again. Jake picked up a broken spear shaft from the sand. When Dexthor swung his blade, Jake used the shaft to redirect the blow, just like they'd taught him in training. The energy blade sailed past his head. Off balance, Dexthor stumbled forward. Jake dropped the shaft and moved in close, inside the reach of the long blade where the warrior couldn't use it effectively. He struck at pressure points he'd memorized from the brief time he'd observed the Crithians. Behind the knee, under the arm, the base of the neck. Not killing blows, but painful ones. Dexthor roared and tried to grab him. Jake slipped away, but not before grabbing the warrior's wrist. Using leverage and momentum, Jake twisted. It was a move he'd practiced 1,000 times. Dexthor's own strength worked against him. The warrior flipped through the air and crashed onto his back. The energy blade flew from his hand and landed in the sand 10 feet away. The arena went silent. Jake stood over the fallen warrior, breathing hard. He could grab the blade. He could end this. But looking at Dexthor, he saw a warrior who had fought with honor. Even if it was honor Jake didn't share. And Jake wasn't a killer. Not if he didn't have to be. Instead, he put his foot on Dexthor's chest and pressed down. The warrior tried to rise but couldn't. He was beaten and he knew it. After a moment, he stopped struggling and lay still. Submission. Jake looked up at the royal box. Queen Zarakai stared back at him. Her face showed something Jake couldn't quite read. Surprise, respect, interest? Her lips moved, forming words too quiet for anyone else to hear. I wish he were my husband. The arena guards escorted Jake back to his holding cell. His body ached from the fight. Bruises were already forming on his arms and ribs, but he was alive. That was more than he'd expected an hour ago. Amy and Danny rushed to him the moment the guards pushed him through the door. Amy grabbed his shoulders, checking him for serious injuries. Danny looked pale with worry. You're insane, Amy said, but she was smiling. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. How did you win? I didn't fight fair, Jake replied, sitting down on the stone bench. Fought smart instead. Danny laughed nervously. The whole arena was shocked. I thought they were going to riot when you threw sand in that guy's face. Before Jake could respond, the door opened again. A different guard stood there, one wearing fancier armor. He spoke in the Crithian language, then seemed to remember himself and switched to words their translators could handle. The Queen wishes to speak with you. Come. Jake exchanged glances with his crew. This could be good or very bad. He stood and followed the guard. This time they didn't take him to the throne room. Instead, they walked through quieter hallways decorated with strange art. The guard stopped at a door and opened it. The room inside was smaller than the throne room, but still impressive. Windows looked out over the alien city. Queen Zarakai stood by one window, her back to him. She'd removed her crown and some of her armor. Somehow she looked even more dangerous without it. The guard left and closed the door. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the queen turned. You fight like no warrior I have ever seen. Jake shrugged. I'm not a warrior. I'm a pilot. But humans learn to fight. We have to. Why? Your species has no natural weapons. No claws, no strength compared to most galactic races. That's exactly why, Jake said. We're not the strongest or fastest. So we learn to think, to adapt, To use what we have. Queen Zarakai studied him with those amber eyes. Tell me about human war, so Jake did. He talked about Earth's history, about how humans fought each other for thousands of years and learned from every battle. He explained concepts like guerrilla warfare, where small groups defeated larger armies. He described special forces soldiers who used stealth and surprise instead of direct confrontation. He talked about strategy, about thinking 3 steps ahead. The Queen listened. Really listened. She asked questions. Smart questions. Jake realized she wasn't just curious. She was learning, planning. Days passed. Each day Jake was brought to the same room. Sometimes they talked about fighting. Other times they talked about other things. The Queen told him about the Crithian Empire, about how they'd conquered world after world through superior combat. But she also talked about problems. My people only respect strength, she said one day. But strength alone will not keep an empire together. I know this. Many of my nobles do not. Jake found himself liking her. Beneath the warrior exterior was a sharp mind and a leader who cared about her people. He could see the loneliness, too. Being a queen meant being apart from everyone else. Meanwhile, his crew was treated better. They were given better quarters, better food. Amy worked with Crithian engineers, sharing knowledge. Danny got to see their technology up close. They were no longer prisoners. Not quite guests, but something in between. Then everything changed. Jake was in the Queen's private room when an armored figure burst through the door. It was General Korvax, the scarred warrior who had first presented the humans to the Queen. He glared at Jake with pure hatred. This has gone too far, my Queen, Korvax said. His voice was hard and cold. You spend your days with this weak creature. You share our secrets with aliens. The noble houses are talking. They question your judgment. Zarakai's eyes flashed with anger. You question my judgment, General? You who failed to see the value in these humans? Value? He defeated one gladiator with tricks and dishonor. That proves nothing. It proves humans are more than they appear. It proves we can learn from them. Korvax stepped closer. Then let him prove it again. Let him face the trial of champions. If he survives that, I will accept your judgment. If he fails, you will admit you were wrong, and this human influence ends. Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. The trial of champions. Even he'd heard of it during his time here. It was an ancient test where a warrior faced 3 champions at once. Almost no one survived. The trial is sacred, the Queen said slowly. It is not used for testing whether someone is worthy. That is exactly what it is for. Korvax smiled. It was not a kind smile. Unless you are afraid the human will fail? Unless you know he cannot truly match our warriors? It was a trap. Jake could see it clearly. If the Queen refused, she would look weak. If she agreed, Jake would probably die. And there was something else in Korvax's eyes. Ambition. This wasn't just about Jake, this was about power. I accept, Jake said. Both the Queen and Korvax turned to look at him. Zarakai's face showed shock. Jake, you do not understand what you— I understand, Jake interrupted. I understand this is about more than me. If I refuse, your position is weakened. If I die, at least I die fighting. He looked at Korvax. But I'm not going to die, Korvax laughed. Brave words. We shall see if you can back them up. 3 days from now in the Grand Arena, you will face Rathel the Crusher, Silva the Shadow, and Torgan the Immovable. All at once. He turned to the Queen. And if he loses, you will step down as ruler. I will take the throne and restore proper Crithian values. So that was it. This was a coup disguised as a trial. Jake felt anger replace his fear. He was being used as a pawn in someone else's power game. The Queen's voice was ice. Those are not the traditional terms of the trial. Then make new terms. Or refuse and prove you care more for this alien than your people. Zarakai was trapped and she knew it. After a long moment, she nodded. Agreed, 3 days. If Jake Morrison survives the trial of champions, you will accept my rule without question. You will swear loyalty before all the noble houses. If he survives. Korvax looked at Jake one more time. Enjoy your last 3 days, human. When the general left, silence filled the room. Finally, Zarakai spoke. Her voice was softer than Jake had ever heard it. Why did you accept? You could have refused. I would have found another way. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the alien city. No, you couldn't have. He backed you into a corner. If you'd refused or tried to find another way, he would have used it against you. The other nobles would have seen weakness. He turned to face her. I've been watching your court. I've seen how it works. Korvax has been planning this for a while, hasn't he? She nodded slowly. Yes, he commands the loyalty of many warrior houses. If he challenges me directly for the throne, it will mean civil war. This way he can take power without bloodshed, or with only your blood. Then I'll just have to win. Jake tried to sound confident. He wasn't sure he succeeded. Zarakai crossed the room in 3 long steps. She grabbed his shoulders, her grip strong but not painful. Jake Morrison. I have sent warriors to their deaths before. It is part of being a ruler. But this, she paused. I do not want you to die. They stood close. Jake could see golden flecks in her amber eyes. For all her strength and power, right now she looked almost vulnerable. I don't plan on dying, Jake said quietly. I have too much to live for now. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding. A connection that went beyond words. The queen of the Crithian Empire and a human pilot from a small exploration ship. It should have been impossible. But it was real. Later that night, Jake told Amy and Danny what had happened. Amy paced back and forth, angry. This is insane. 3 champions at once? That's not a trial, that's an execution. Maybe, Jake agreed. But it's happening. So we need to prepare. Danny pulled up files on his portable computer. I've been recording everything I could about Crithian physiology. Their strengths, their weaknesses. If you're going to fight 3 of them, you need every advantage. Amy stopped pacing. And I've been watching their combat recordings. Each of these 3 champions has a specialty. Rathel uses brute force. Silva is all about speed and agility. Torgon is defensive, nearly impossible to knock down. So I need to fight all 3 styles at once. Jake rubbed his face. Great. They worked through the night, studying, planning. Human military tactics against alien warriors. It felt impossible. But humans had overcome impossible odds before. That's what they did, 3 days. Jake had 3 days to prepare for the fight of his life. 3 days before he faced 3 champions in an arena designed for death. 3 days before everything changed. The 3 days passed too quickly. Jake spent every waking hour training. Amy and Danny helped him study recordings of the 3 champions. They analyzed fighting styles, looked for patterns, searched for any weakness they could find. Rathel the Crusher was a mountain of muscle. He fought with pure power, breaking through any defense with overwhelming force. His weapon was a massive hammer that could shatter stone, but he was slow to change direction once he committed to an attack. Silva the Shadow was his opposite. She moved like liquid, fast and graceful. Twin blades flashed in her hands. She specialized in quick strikes to vital points, but she was lighter than the other champions, built for speed instead of endurance. Torgon the Immovable was the most dangerous in some ways. He carried a massive shield and wore the heaviest armor. His defensive stance had never been broken in recorded combat. He waited for opponents to exhaust themselves, then crushed them. But his armor meant he moved slowly and his vision was limited. 3 different fighting styles, Jake said on the second night. They'll coordinate. Rathel and Torgon will try to trap me between them while Silva goes for quick strikes. So don't let them coordinate, Amy replied. She pointed at the screen. Keep moving. Force them to react to you instead of working together. Danny nodded. Divide and conquer. It's the oldest human military strategy. If you can't fight 3 opponents at once, make sure you only fight 1 at a time. On the final night before the trial, Queen Zarakai came to see Jake. The guards led her into the training room where he was practicing. She watched him go through movements, studying his technique. When he stopped, breathing hard, she spoke. We could call this off. I could challenge Korvax directly. That would mean civil war, Jake said, wiping sweat from his face. You told me that. Half the Empire would follow him. Better civil war than your death. Jake walked over to her. Even exhausted and facing possible death tomorrow, he felt strangely calm. Listen to me. I'm going to win tomorrow. Not because I'm stronger or faster, but because I'm human. And humans are really, really good at surviving impossible situations. How can you be so confident? Because I have something to fight for. He looked into her amber eyes. I have you. The next morning came too soon. Jake was escorted to the arena through the same dark tunnels as before. But this time the crowd was even larger. Word had spread across the entire empire. The human who defeated Dexthor would now face the trial of champions. Everyone wanted to see if he could do it again. Jake stepped out onto the sand. The sun was bright overhead. The arena floor was clear except for a few scattered obstacles. He was given the same thing as last time. No armor, no weapons. Just his uniform and his wits. 3 doors opened. The champions entered to massive cheers. Rathul's hammer dragged lines in the sand. Silva's blades caught the sunlight. Torgan's shield reflected the watching crowd. They moved to surround Jake, forming a triangle with him in the center. In the royal box, Queen Zarakai sat forward on her throne. Her hands gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles turned pale against her violet skin. Amy and Danny stood beside her, the queen having granted them permission to watch. They all held their breath as the horn sounded. Jake didn't wait for them to attack. He ran, not away but directly at Torgan. The champion raised his shield, expecting an impact. Instead, Jake slid under the shield at the last second, sand spraying. He came up behind Torgan and kept running. Silva came at him fast. Her blades were a blur. Jake grabbed a broken piece of wood from the sand, using it to deflect one blade while dodging the other. The wood shattered, but it bought him time. He rolled away, putting distance between them. Rathul swung his hammer in a massive arc. Jake jumped back. The hammer hit the sand where he'd been standing. The impact created a small crater. If that had hit him, the fight would be over. The crowd roared. Jake kept moving, never staying in one place. He used the obstacles in the arena, the pillars and broken walls. When Silva came at him again, he led her toward Rathul. At the last second, he ducked. Rathul's hammer swing, meant to catch Jake, instead forced Silva to dodge. The two champions got in each other's way. Good. They were powerful individually, but they weren't used to fighting as a coordinated team. Jake could use that. Torgan tried to pin him against a wall with his shield. Jake waited until the shield was close, then jumped and used it as a stepping stone. He vaulted over Torgan's head, landing behind the armored champion. Before Torgan could turn, Jake kicked hard at the back of his knee joint where the armor was thinner. Torgan stumbled but didn't fall. His armor protected him too well. But Jake had learned something. Even the immovable could be moved. Minutes passed. Jake was bleeding from several cuts where Silva's blades had gotten too close. His body ached from near misses with the hammer. But the champions were breathing hard too. They weren't used to an opponent who refused to stand and fight. The crowd was confused. Some booed Jake's tactics. Others leaned forward with interest. This wasn't normal arena combat. This was something else. Something new. Jake saw his opportunity. Rathul was tired, his hammer swing slower. Silva was getting frustrated, taking more risks. Torgan was the least affected, but his heavy armor meant he couldn't keep up with the pace. Time to stop running and start winning. He led Silva toward one of the stone pillars. She followed, blades ready. At the last moment, Jake dropped and rolled to the side. Silva's blade struck stone. Sparks flew. The blade stuck for just a second. Jake swept her legs. She fell hard. Before she could recover, he was on her, using a pressure point strike to her neck. She went limp. Not dead, but unconscious. One down. The crowd gasped. Rathul roared in anger and charged. His hammer came down like a falling mountain. Jake dodged, but barely. The hammer's edge grazed his shoulder. Pain exploded through his arm. No time to think about pain. Jake grabbed Silva's fallen blade with his good hand. Now he had a weapon. But Rathul was already swinging again. Jake didn't try to block. Instead, he used the blade to redirect the hammer's path just slightly. The weapon crashed into the ground beside him instead of on top of him. While Rathul struggled to lift the heavy hammer, Jake struck. He slashed at the champion's hand. Not deep, but enough to make the warrior loosen his grip. The hammer fell. Jake kicked it away across the sand. Without his weapon, Rathul looked confused. He'd relied on the hammer so much he'd forgotten how to fight without it. Jake pressed his advantage. Quick strikes with the blade, not trying to kill, just to wound and tire. Rathul tried to grab him, but Jake was faster. Finally, exhausted and bleeding, Rathul dropped to one knee. He raised his hand in surrender, 2 down. 1 to go. Torgan stood alone now. His shield was up, his stance perfect. The immovable. Jake circled him slowly. His injured shoulder throbbed. His body screamed for rest, but he couldn't rest yet. The arena was silent. Everyone watched. This was it. The final test. Jake studied Torgan. The champion hadn't attacked once during the whole fight. He only defended. His entire strategy was to wait for opponents to tire themselves out. Well, Jake was tired, but he had one more trick. He attacked. Quick strikes against the shield. Each one pushed Torgan back slightly. The champion dug his feet in, resisting. Jake kept striking faster and faster. The blade rang against metal. Then suddenly Jake changed tactics. Instead of striking high, he dropped low and struck at Torgon's ankles. The armor there was thinner, allowing movement. The champion had to adjust his shield downward to block. That was the opening Jake needed. With the shield low, Torgon's upper body was exposed. Jake threw sand into the eye slit of the helmet. The champion jerked back, blinded. Jake moved behind him and struck at a specific point on the armor. Danny had found it in his analysis, a weak point where the backplate joined the shoulder guard. The blade found the gap. Not a killing blow, but enough to disable Torgon's shield arm. The massive shield fell. Torgon stood defenseless.
He could fight on, but they both knew the outcome now.
Slowly, the immovable knelt and bowed his head in defeat. Jake stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by 3 defeated champions. His body was battered and bleeding. His shoulder burned with pain, but he was standing. He was alive. The crowd exploded. Some cheered, some booed, some simply stared in shock. A human had done the impossible. He had survived the trial of champions. Jake looked up at the royal box. Queen Zarakai was already moving, rushing down to the arena floor. Protocol be damned. She ran across the sand and caught Jake as his legs finally gave out. "You foolish, brave, impossible human," she whispered, holding him. "Did I win?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "You won." Medical staff rushed onto the field. But before they reached him, Zarakai did something that shocked every Krithian watching. She removed her crown and held it above her head. Her voice rang out across the arena. "This human has proven his worth beyond any doubt. He has survived the trial of champions. He has shown courage, intelligence, and strength of will. By the ancient laws of our people, I claim Jake Morrison as my chosen consort. Let any who oppose this speak now or forever hold their peace." Silence. Even General Korvac, standing in the noble section, said nothing. He had agreed to the terms. If Jake survived, Korvax would accept the Queen's judgment. The trial had been witnessed by thousands. There was no escape from that oath. Jake looked up at Zarakai. Even through the pain and exhaustion, he understood what had just happened. She hadn't just claimed him as consort. She had made a statement to her entire empire. Humans were not weak. They were not inferior. They were worthy of respect. Before he passed out from exhaustion, Jake managed to speak. "Does this mean I don't have to fight anymore?" Zarakai laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. "No more arena fights, I promise." As the medical staff carried him away, the crowd continued to roar. Some in approval, some in outrage, but all in shock. The galaxy had just learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a human who has something to fight for. Jake woke up 3 days later in a room he didn't recognize. Soft light filtered through tall windows. The bed was comfortable, much better than the cell he'd been kept in before. His shoulder was bandaged and the pain was manageable. Someone had taken good care of him. Amy sat in a chair beside the bed, reading something on a data pad. She looked up when she heard him move. "About time you woke up," she said with a smile. "You've been out for 3 days. 3 days?" Jake tried to sit up. His body protested. What happened after the fight? Chaos, mostly. Amy helped him adjust the pillows. The Queen's announcement split the court right down the middle. Half the nobles think she's a visionary. The other half think she's lost her mind. What about Korvax? He kept his word. Publicly, at least. He swore loyalty in front of the noble houses like he promised. But Danny and I don't trust him. We've been keeping our ears open. The door opened. Queen Zarakai entered. She'd removed most of her formal armor and wore simpler clothes. Somehow it made her look even more impressive. Amy stood and bowed slightly. "I'll give you two some privacy." She left, closing the door behind her. Zarakai sat on the edge of the bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I fought 3 champions at once." Jake tried to smile. "But alive, so I'm not complaining." She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was gentle. "Jake Morrison, I meant what I said in the arena. I claim you as my consort, but I will not force this. If you wish to return to your people, to Earth, I will provide a ship and safe passage." Jake looked at their joined hands, her violet skin against his. 2 different species from 2 different worlds. It should have been impossible, but it felt right. "I need to know something first," he said. "This isn't just about us, is it? If I become your consort, it changes things between humans and Krithians. It means something politically." She nodded. "Yes. It would be a statement that humans are our equals, worthy of alliance rather than conquest. Many of my people will resist this idea, but I believe it is the right path forward. Then I have a condition, Jake said. I'll accept, but only if you agree to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Real relations, not as overlords and subjects.
As partners, Zarakai smiled.
You drive a hard bargain, Captain Morrison. I learned from the best. He squeezed her hand. So do we have a deal? We have a deal. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. Messages were sent to Earth. The human government was shocked to learn that one of their exploration vessels had made contact with a major galactic power. They scrambled to put together a diplomatic team. Meanwhile, Jake began learning what it meant to be consort to a Crithian queen. It wasn't just about ceremonies and public appearances. Zarakai trusted his advice. She asked his opinion on military matters, on dealing with the noble houses, on the future of the Empire. Jake introduced human concepts of warfare and strategy, combined arms tactics, special operations, asymmetric warfare. The Crithian military commanders were skeptical at first. But when Jake demonstrated these techniques in training exercises, even the doubters had to admit they had value. Amy and Danny became unofficial ambassadors. They worked with Crithian engineers and scientists, sharing knowledge. The Crithians had better weapons and shields. Humans had better computer systems and sensor technology. Together they could create something greater than either alone. But not everyone was happy. General Korvax remained quiet, but Jake could feel the hatred whenever they were in the same room. Other traditionalist nobles grumbled about alien corruption. Complaints reached the Queen daily. One evening, Danny rushed into Jake's quarters with his portable computer. His face was pale. We have a problem, Danny said. A big one. He showed Jake what he'd found. While repairing some equipment in a restricted area of the palace, Danny had accidentally accessed a hidden communication network, encrypted messages between Korvax and someone outside the Empire. I broke the encryption, Danny explained. It wasn't easy, but I managed. Jake, Korvax is planning a coup, and he's not working alone. He's coordinating with the Cathraxi Empire. Jake felt cold. The Cathraxi were the Crithians' traditional enemies. The two empires had fought wars for centuries. When? Jake asked. The royal bonding ceremony. 2 days from now. Danny pulled up more files. Cathraxi assassins will infiltrate during the ceremony. They'll kill you and the Queen. Korvax will blame humanity, use it to start a war with Earth and seize power in the chaos. Jake's mind raced. 2 days. They had 2 days to stop a conspiracy that could destroy everything they'd built. They brought the information to Queen Zarakai immediately. She read through Danny's evidence, her face growing darker with each line. This is treason of the highest order, she said finally. Korvax has allied with our enemies. He has put his ambition above the Empire. We could cancel the ceremony, Amy suggested. Arrest Korvax now before he can act. Jake shook his head. No, if we cancel it looks like fear, and we don't have enough evidence to arrest him publicly. The messages could be faked, his supporters would claim. Then what do you suggest? Zarakai asked. Jake thought about it. A plan was forming in his mind. Risky, but it could work. We let them make their move, he said. But we're ready for it. We turn their trap against them. That's dangerous, Amy said. Assassins. During your wedding ceremony? It's also an opportunity. Jake looked at Zarakai. The Earth diplomatic mission arrives tomorrow. They're bringing an honor guard. What if that honor guard includes some of Earth's best special forces soldiers? Understanding dawned in the Queen's eyes. The Cathraxi assassins would be prepared for Crithian security. They wouldn't be prepared for human special forces using tactics they'd never seen before. You want to use human soldiers to defend against the attack, she said slowly, and in doing so prove to my people that humanity is not just equal but essential. Exactly. And we catch Korvax red-handed in front of the entire court. No one can deny his treason then. Zarakai stood and paced the room, thinking. Finally she nodded. It is a risk. But you are right. If we hide from this threat, we appear weak. If we face it and overcome it together, human and Crithian side by side, we prove our alliance is strong. The next day, the Earth diplomatic mission arrived. Ambassador Henry Cole was a veteran negotiator with gray hair and sharp eyes. He listened carefully as Jake explained the situation. You're asking me to risk human soldiers in an alien political conflict, Cole said. I'm asking you to protect Earth's interests, Jake replied. If Korvax succeeds, war between humanity and the Crethean Empire becomes inevitable. Thousands, maybe millions, will die. But if we stop him, we secure peace for both our peoples. Cole thought for a long moment. Then he called in Commander Lisa Grant, who led the security team. She was tough and experienced. Exactly the kind of soldier needed for this mission. We brought 20 Special Forces operators, Grant said after reviewing the intelligence. If you're right about the timing and location, we can position them to intercept the assassins. But we'll need exact information on the ceremony layout. They worked through the night. Danny provided detailed maps of the temple where the ceremony would take place. Amy coordinated with loyal Crethean guards who could be trusted. Grant positioned her soldiers carefully, disguised as honor guards but ready for combat. The morning of the ceremony arrived. Jake dressed in formal clothes that blended human and Crethean styles. His shoulder still ached, but he ignored it. Today would determine the future of two species. Queen Zarakai looked magnificent in her ceremonial armor. She met Jake's eyes. Are you ready? He took her hand. Together. Together. They walked into the temple side by side. The ceremony was about to begin, and somewhere in the shadows assassins waited. But so did Commander Grant and her soldiers. The trap was set. The next few hours would change everything. The Temple of Warriors was ancient and beautiful. Tall pillars reached toward the ceiling. Sunlight streamed through colored glass windows, painting the floor in patterns of light. Thousands of nobles filled the space, dressed in their finest armor and robes. Everyone who mattered in the Crethean Empire was here. Jake and Zarakai stood at the center before an ancient altar. The priest spoke words in Old Crethean, words about unity and strength. Jake barely heard them. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for any sign of danger. The human honor guard stood at attention along the walls. To anyone watching, they looked ceremonial, but Jake knew better. Each soldier was positioned to cover a different section of the temple. Commander Grant stood near the main entrance, her hand never far from her weapon. The ceremony continued. Jake and Zarakai exchanged vows, first in Crethean tradition, then in human custom. They bound their hands together with a ceremonial cloth. The priest declared them bonded before the gods and the Empire. The crowd cheered. For a moment, Jake allowed himself to hope that maybe Danny had been wrong. Maybe the assassins wouldn't come. Maybe they could have one day of peace. Then he saw it, a slight movement in the shadows behind one of the pillars, something that didn't belong. The attack came during the ceremonial feast. One moment, nobles were raising glasses to toast the new union. The next, figures in dark armor dropped from the ceiling. Cathraxi assassins moving with deadly speed toward Jake and Zarakai. But Commander Grant had been watching too. At her signal, the human soldiers moved. They didn't wait for the assassins to reach their targets. They intercepted them halfway. The battle was fast and brutal. The Cathraxi were skilled, but they'd planned for Crethean guards, not human special forces. Grant's soldiers used tactics the assassins had never encountered. Coordinated movements, suppression fire, non-lethal takedowns when possible. More assassins appeared, trying to push through. Some Crethean guards loyal to the Queen joined the fight, but it was the humans who turned the tide. They moved like water, covering each other, anticipating threats before they materialized. Jake grabbed Zarakai and pulled her behind the altar. She reached for her weapon, but he stopped her. Let them handle it, Jake said. This is what human soldiers do best. They watched as Grant's team systematically dismantled the attack. Within 3 minutes, it was over. Every assassin was either captured or dead. Not a single noble had been harmed. The human soldiers stood ready, barely breathing hard. The temple was silent. Every Crethean present had just witnessed human combat efficiency. These soft-skinned aliens had protected their queen better than their own warriors could have. Jake stood. Bring forward General Korvax. Korvax stood among the nobles, his face carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed him. He'd expected chaos and death. Instead, he found order and failure. General, Zarakai's voice rang out. These assassins wore Cathraxi armor. Our enemies attacked during a sacred ceremony. This is an act of war. Indeed, my queen, Korvax said smoothly. The Cathraxi grow bold. We must respond with force. Danny stepped forward, holding his computer. Actually, we should ask the general how the Cathraxi knew the exact layout of this temple. How they knew the ceremony schedule. How they knew which guards would be where. He projected images onto the temple wall. encrypted messages, communication logs, evidence of months of coordination between Korvax and Cathraxi agents. The crowd gasped. Several nobles stepped away from Korvax as if he carried a disease. Treason was the worst crime in Krithian culture. Alliance with their ancient enemies was unforgivable. Korvax's face twisted with rage. Lies, human fabrications. Then explain this. Commander Grant threw something at Korvax's feet. A communication device Cathraxi make. We took this from one of the assassins. It contains direct messages to someone using your personal encryption code. Korvax looked around the room. No support came. Even his allies among the nobles backed away. He was caught and everyone knew it. Finally, his shoulders sagged. I did it for the Empire, he said quietly. You were corrupted by aliens. You betrayed our warrior heritage. I sought to restore what we once were. Zarakai descended from the altar. She walked slowly toward Korvax until she stood before him. You betrayed everything we stand for. Our strength comes from unity, not from purity. You would have destroyed the Empire to save it. What is your judgment, my queen? One of the nobles asked. Death is the traditional punishment for treason. Jake stepped forward and stood beside Zarakai. He spoke quietly so only she could hear. Killing him makes him a martyr. Some will always believe he was right, that he was defending tradition. But if you exile him, you show strength through mercy. You prove that the new Krithian Empire is different from the old one. Zarakai considered this. Then she spoke loud enough for all to hear. General Korvax, I strip you of rank, title, and property. You are exiled to the Outer Rim, to a world where you can do no more harm. You will live out your days knowing that the empire you tried to save has moved beyond you. Some nobles looked surprised. Others nodded in approval. It was a punishment that showed strength without cruelty. It was, Jake realized, very human. As guards led Korvax away, Zarakai addressed the assembled nobles. Today you witnessed an attack on your queen. You also witnessed humans defending this empire with their lives. Let no one say again that humanity is weak. Let no one question the value of our alliance. She gestured to Commander Grant. These soldiers showed coordination and skill that saved countless lives. This is what we can learn from humanity. This is why our future is stronger together than apart. The nobles began to cheer. Not all of them, but enough. The tide was turning. Jake could see it in their faces. Fear and suspicion were giving way to respect. In the weeks that followed, formal treaties were signed. The Krithian Empire and Earth established diplomatic relations as equals. Trade agreements were made. Military advisors were exchanged. Young Krithians traveled to Earth to study human culture and history. Human engineers came to learn from Krithian technology. Jake found his new role challenging but rewarding. He helped Zarakai modernize the Krithian military. They combined Krithian strength with human strategy. The result was an army more effective than either species could have created alone. Amy and Danny eventually returned to Earth, but they visited often. Amy became Earth's primary liaison to the Krithian military. Danny helped establish technology-sharing programs. The three humans who had stumbled into Krithian space by accident had changed the course of history. 1 year after the bonding ceremony, Jake stood in the same grand arena where he'd first fought Dexthor. But today there was no deathmatch. Today, human and Krithian soldiers trained together, demonstrating combined tactics to an audience of military commanders from across the Empire. He watched from the royal box, with Zarakai. She placed her hand on his. He noticed she was resting her other hand on her abdomen, where their child grew. The first human-Krithian hybrid. Scientists said it shouldn't be possible, but life found a way. Do you ever regret it? Zarakai asked quietly. Choosing to stay? Becoming part of all this? Jake looked at her. The warrior queen who had whispered, I wish he were my husband after watching him fight barehanded in this very arena. The leader who had risked her throne to do what was right. The woman who had become his wife and partner. Not for a second, he said. On the arena floor below, a human soldier and a Krithian warrior worked together to take down 3 opponents. The crowd cheered. Not because of violence, but because of skill and cooperation. The Empire was learning. Above them in orbit, ships patrolled. Human vessels and Krithian warships flying together, protecting their allied territories. 2 species that had been strangers now stood as partners. News of the alliance spread across the galaxy. Other species heard about the humans who had earned the respect of the mighty Krithian Empire. Some were curious, some were afraid, but all paid attention. Humanity had announced itself on the galactic stage, not as conquerors or victims, but as equals who earned their place through courage, intelligence, and the refusal to give up. The story of Captain Jake Morrison, who fought barehanded and won not just freedom but the heart of a warrior queen, became legend. It was told on 100 worlds in 12 languages, and every time someone told it, the message was the same. Never underestimate humanity. They may not be the strongest or fastest, but they adapt. They survive. And when they fight smart. Jake squeezed Zarakai's hand as they watched the demonstration below. Their child kicked gently, a reminder of the future they were building together. A future where humans and Crithians would grow up side by side, learning from each other. The arena crowd roared its approval as the demonstration ended. Jake smiled. It had been a long journey from that first day when he'd been thrown into this arena as a prisoner, but every step had been worth it. Ambassador Cole approached the royal box. "A message just arrived from Earth," he said. "More exploration ships are preparing to launch. They want to know if you have any advice for them, Captain Morrison." Jake thought about everything he'd experienced. The fights, the challenges, the political intrigue, but also the friendships, the love, the hope for a better future. "Tell them to explore boldly," Jake said. "Tell them to be smart, be adaptable, and never give up. And tell them that humanity is no longer alone out here. We have friends now. Powerful friends." Cole smiled and went to send the message. Zarakai leaned against Jake's shoulder, watching their people train together on the arena floor. "Our child will grow up in a very different galaxy than either of us did," she said softly. "A better one, I hope," Jake replied. "Because of what we started here. Because a human refused to give up even when facing impossible odds." Jake laughed. "That's just what humans do. We're stubborn like that." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the future unfold before them. A future built on respect, cooperation, and the understanding that strength comes in many forms. The Crithian Empire was stronger for having humans as allies, and humanity was safer for having earned the respect of a galactic power. It all started with one man fighting barehanded in an arena, with a warrior queen who recognized something special when she saw it, with a whispered wish that became reality. And now, looking at the stars beyond the arena's open roof, Jake knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had proven itself to one empire. There were countless others out there waiting to learn the same lesson. Never underestimate humanity. Not their strength, not their courage, and especially not their ability to survive against impossible odds, because humans don't just survive. They thrive. They adapt. They overcome. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they might just save your empire and win your heart at the same time. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.